You're watching Experience Comic Culture and Sales. Streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
2, 1.
Hi, everybody. It's Miss Jen here on The Experience. I'm super excited to see you guys today. I'm sorry we had like a half-size Talkin Shop. It's all my fault. All my fault. But I'll make it up to you by having really awesome person on today. If you, by the way, know somebody that's got something that's coming out soon and you really want me to interview them, I am all about it because I feel like I've got my hands on the pulse of what's going on in comic books, but there are some really talented people out there that I just haven't crossed paths with. So if you've got a favorite person that's got something coming to Kickstarter, or they've got stuff at a small press company, or heck, you know somebody that's putting something out for Marvel or DC, let me know. I'm totally down with getting everyone scheduled and making sure to let everybody know about their cool stuff. So stick around. Make sure you share. Do your thumbs up. Make sure you get everybody in the room so we can all be here for this fun right after this. Oh, by the way, no, Bueller, you're the coolest. You're the coolest. All right, everybody, hey, come hang out with me. We're going to talk about a cool series called The Shepherd, which you may or may not have actually gotten multiple copies of the earlier series of. We're talking about some of the cool stuff that came out as little individual books that are going to now be put together, which is super cool. We're going to talk to Andrea Molinari. Hello. Uh-oh. Where did our sound go? Nope. I can't hear you, but try just popping out and popping back on. Just click out and come back into the room and it should be fine. It was working like 2 seconds ago and we were jibber jabbering about sports ball teams in Pittsburgh. We'll get it fixed. Don't worry.
All right. How's that?
Magic.
Just like that.
It's the same for every technical problem. Did you turn it off and turn it on again?
Exactly. Exactly. I was thinking the same thing.
Looks like you've been traveling. Is that something you often do?
Well, I do a lot of conventions, of course. So yeah, I do. I think I was 25, 26 conventions last year, and I'm getting geared up for this week. I'll be headed to Pensacon in Pensacola.
Ooh, that sounds like a lot of fun. So is there like any focus that convention has? Are they a real comic convention? Oh no! I bet you it's not his home Wi-Fi. If we have complete failure, we'll still figure out something. Don't worry. So what you don't know is he's actually traveling back from being away.
All right.
Not on his home Wi-Fi, correct?
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I am traveling. We talked off air. My wife does retreats for veterans, PTSD retreats, therapeutic retreats. She doesn't inflict PTSD. She does the therapy for it. So I have to watch how I say things here. Anyway, long story short, we were in Tampa for the weekend, and we just finished up around noon today, and then headed. She has family here in Orlando, so on the way back to West Palm Beach, we stopped off here in Orlando so I could do this interview, and she'd be able to visit with her family. So long, convoluted answer.
That's perfect. Okay, so I know that we've got to talk to you before, and I'd love to have everybody get to know you really well. I mean, I'm intrigued by what your wife does. what is her background that she settled on doing that wonderful thing? Because that's a really important thing that she's doing.
Well, I'll give you the Reader's Digest. I mean, she did go to school, psychology, undergrad psychology, and then of course she was always had an inclination towards counseling, and so she ended up doing a master's degree in counseling when we were, young newlyweds. And I always felt like that was a good direction for her. Career started out in child protective services, which, if you know anything about psychology, has got to be one of the roughest jobs that there is out there, because some of the things that she would come back and tell me stuff that she was dealing with, and it made me want to, don the cape and cowl and just like, okay, Batman's going to be a thing, and Batman is going to target the people that abuse the children. It was tough, but that's how her career started. And so dealing with trauma was something that she was dealing with from the very beginning. Eventually, as her career evolved and we traveled, life took us different places. She got involved with working with the Salvation Army, doing counseling with the Salvation Army. And she was working largely with homeless population. And as she worked with that population, she began to realize that a lot of that population, a big chunk of the population, are veterans, and that they're basically self-medicating with drugs or alcohol to deal with what they experienced, maybe Afghanistan, Iraq, before that in Vietnam, wherever, and she really fell in love with that population, and a job opening came at the VA. And the rest is pretty much history. She got involved in, directly doing the post-traumatic stress counseling, the military sexual trauma, which is another area of trauma that she specialized in, and then traumatic brain injury. Anyway, long story short, she and a friend of hers founded a retreat program, all free for veterans. They do 7 retreats a year in Odessa, Florida, which is just, totally different state. But Odessa is just a northern suburb of Tampa. And they do the retreats there 7 times a year. It's like a 4-day retreat. And they pay for everything. So the veterans are free. Their airfare, taxi, food, you name it, it's all covered. And all charitable donations. And we just spent a weekend doing that, or she did. I was keeping the home fires burning. I drove her, I'm the chauffeur, back and forth, and stayed at the hotel waiting for her and that type of thing. But I'm real proud of the work she's done. But it's been a huge influence. I kind of say that as a kind of a preamble, because her work in trauma is directly informing my work with the Shepherd, because the Shepherd deals with souls in the afterlife that have experienced some kind of trauma. It's like ghost stories, basically. I've always been fascinated with those ghost stories where there's something that is keeping that ghost there. It's causing the ghost to haunt, or to kind of like repeat some experience that they had in life that they can't move on from. And her work has definitely had a major impact on my work with telling the ghost stories that are related to the Shepherd. So
yeah, I was wondering that. It was like, surely this has had some impact on the storytelling, like to be inspired
massive
by it.
impact, yeah. In fact, our second novel, which is called The Path of Souls, deals with, it's a hospital in the afterlife for the souls of soldiers that are suffering from PTSD from different time periods and cultures. So there's where you see it the most obviously. But in every one of the stories, I'm kind of like using her as my free consultant, where I'm asking. I'm laughing because I'm like, it's all unpaid, baby. All the best for you. But I ask her all the time. It's like, imagine this scenario. How do you see this playing out? I mean, what do you think of an impact would have on a person, if they've been through something like this? And it's all that advice that she gives me. And we talk about strategy of how you would do counseling with someone who's experienced something like that, and it kind of influences where the story is going to go with the Shepherd. So I'm very fortunate in that regard.
Okay, so this makes even more sense to me. I knew you were a very talented writer, and I knew you were writing from the heart, but this makes it even more like, okay, now I'm informed that this is, it's been vetted as being, this is, we've touched on somebody that would know, is this something that seems like the way it would shake out. Does
Yeah.
make sense in this universe? Because I hear a lot from people that are in the military or policemen or firemen when there's books or movies or comic books that are written about things that they're supposed to be doing, and they're like, when did they even ask one of us when they before they wrote this?
No, all the time. I mean, I take that research very seriously. I talked, like, especially with that novel, The Path of Souls, I talk with a lot of veterans, and I mean, I luckily to have, access to them, because, after the retreat's over, I'm able to, like, I have lunch with them. I had sat and had lunch with them today, get a chance to talk with them. And it's interesting because one of the stories in that Path of Souls is about a soul of a Marine who died in Fallujah, second battle of Fallujah. This would be November 2004. And a couple of retreats ago, I'm sitting there having lunch next to a guy. We're chatting, and he had been there in Fallujah. And so I'm talking with him about that, and he was like, "How did you know all that?" And I said, "Well, there's a lot of good research materials out there, especially in the case of some of the modern stuff, like in Iraq. A lot of it, you can go onto YouTube and see live footage of the combat. So you can see, what these men and women went through. And I take that very seriously. I take the research part of this very seriously, because I want it to ring true. I want it to have authenticity. So that, to me, that's part of the experience of being a writer. And, there's that cliche statement about writers, you write what you know. And, because we're dealing with, my wife is dealing with trauma, and she comes back and she talks to me about, her work, and, it's the kind of stuff that I know. It's the kind of stuff that I breathe that air, so yeah, so it definitely influences the work without a doubt. So, and she's a huge cheerleader for the work. I couldn't do it, I couldn't do it without her.
Oh, love it. So, have you had anybody come up to you in your travels to conventions and say that they've read those issues and it's affected them?
Actually, one of the best experiences I had with regard to that was a Marine Corps colonel who had been in combat both in Iraq and Afghanistan, came back, and he had told me how much he had been moved by the Path of Souls. And I thought to myself, wow, if that passes the muster of a Marine Corps colonel who, was still on active duty, I was like, yeah, okay, I feel pretty good about that. I had another Marine. I've had a number of Marines come up to me and talk to me about it. And one said that he felt like it was back in the Corps. I said, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And he's like, a little both, but yeah, I mean, I've had some really moving experiences with people coming up and talking to me about it. These are intense topics that, for a comic book or graphic novel to deal with. But I think that's the beauty of the medium that we have, is that you can tell any story you want, from a romance to a humorous, we see them all the time, or superhero story, to something that deals with the most serious topics that you can think of. And I think that really speaks to how powerful the medium of sequential art, how powerful a medium it is.
Totally agree. Like, I still have people come into the shop that are like, oh, it's just superhero books. And I'm like, no, here's a book right here about someone's time in the oil sands that won an Eisner this year.
Yeah.
Here's a book about the, Vietnam War, but the people that have parts are bunnies and rabbits, or bunnies and cats.
Yeah.
It's just like, whatever you are interested in, I can give you one that's about Monet.
Sure. Yeah. No, one of the most powerful novels I've ever read, a graphic novel, it's called Nanjing. It deals with the Japanese atrocities that took place in Nanjing there in World War II. And that was a really powerful novel. And it was about something that you don't read about, every day. And that's, like I said, it's the power of that medium, is that it can take on amazing topics, powerful, gut-wrenching topics, and really, and I think it's because it hits you like, in your imagination, you're reading the words, and it hits you there, but it's also you're getting the visuals, and the visuals are like the launch pad to what your brain does with those visuals. So it kind of hits you in multiple ways. Even things like I say, like the sound effects that you put into the comic that they add, they kind of like remind the brain that, oh yeah, when in this kind of a setting, there would be, these kind of noises that are part of the environment, So it's like it's stimulation of the imagination on multiple levels.
Yeah, I can't think of a specific comic, but I know I've been reading books before where, there's no sound going on, but the masterful letterers or writers that cue the letterers that they cue on, especially for horror. Sometimes they come up with they're like weird misspellings of a sound, but it stops your eye. You have to sound it out in your head. It just creeps you all the way out, or it just,
I know.
I don't know. It's a high skill.
It is. Yeah, no, it's funny because before I came on to this interview, I noticed that a friend of mine, John Clark, who I know you know, who's a great horror writer. I have the pleasure of getting to edit for him on a number of his books, and we do talk about that all the time, is the sound effects that are part of the horror, especially the juicy sound effects, like. But I think that they're really important. They add to that creep factor. They add, and why is because I tell people this all the time, is the brain is this amazing machine, and it has this incredible imagination. And if you can, the art stimulates the imagination, the sound effects stimulate the imagination, the words stimulate the imagination, and they cause the reader to enter into that world, which that makes the story that much more jarring and impactful.
Oh, so. Yeah. All right, viewers out there, I know I see that Make Two's on and Kenneth's on. I know I saw Bueller on earlier. If you guys can think of any good examples of, books you've been reading that had really good sound effects that drew you in even more. It doesn't have to be horror. See if you can think of any of those. I'd love to hear it. Or if you have any questions, you can totally pop those up. So the Kickstarter that you've got going on right now, it's for a couple of single shot ones. Was it the Valentine?
It's the Valentine, which is a 3-part, and then the Pit is a 1-shot. And it's volume 3 of The Shepherd. And why that volume is a little different than the other volumes is that it focuses on the paranormal adventures of the shepherd's children. Mm-hmm. And we find that, if you may remember from volume 1 of The Shepherd, it's revealed that his children have the ability to see the dead. And as we were taught, my son, as you know, my son Roberto writes with me. Mm-hmm. And as we were talking about directions, we were talking about, is the shepherd going to be a character that does a lot of adventures in the world as we know it? Or is the shepherd going to be a character that does adventures in the afterlife? And I felt like, because he's dead, I feel like in a lot of ways, we're almost compelled to keep our stories should be in the afterlife. They should be, and there's no limit, of course, but I felt like to truly be true to that character, him being a ghost, that to tell stories that are focused in the afterlife is the best way to be true to that character. So we were thinking, well, what about more traditional ghost stories? What about ghost stories that involve more like hauntings and stuff like that? And I said, well, how would we do that? And Roberto's like, well, the answer is right in front of our face. He's like, Dad, think about it. The kids see the dead. And I thought about it. I was like, oh my God, just like The Sixth Sense. And of course, I love that movie. And so does Roberto. And so we were thinking, with that influence in mind, is, that idea of how creepy it is when a child, can see the dead. And then, that idea of that a child might actually be involved in trying to help the dead move on, and that's really kind of like the driving plot of both those stories, both the Valentine and the Pit. The Valentine is about a little girl who is taken by a serial killer, and it's right around the Valentine's Day, and she's in the process of making a Valentine for her mother. And when she escapes the serial killer, the Valentine is left behind, and she wants it back because she wants her mother to have it. And so that's how she comes to Lexi and Nico, the two children, and wants them to help her, basically go get this Valentine, and then give it to her mother. And then The Pit is, as I said, a one shot, and that's a story about them being approached, believe it or not, by a ghost dog. And this is a dog that has actually died in a dogfighting pit, which is where the title, of course, comes from. And they basically go on this midnight raid where they go to try to rescue the dogs that are still alive in the dogfighting ring. And of course, they end up encountering the guy who's running the ring and all that stuff. But that we had a lot of fun. And that second one, The Pit, is unique because my daughter actually helped me write that one. Berto kind of slid into the editorial role, and my daughter and I were the writers on that story. And so that was really neat to get a chance to work with her, because my daughter is actually the character Lexi. Because in The Shepherd, the family, you may remember that The Shepherd, the original novel, was based on a nightmare that I had about my family. Mm-hmm. So because of that, all the characters are basically avatars of my actual family. And so Lexi is my daughter Lexi's avatar. And so it was weird because I was asking her to write her own character, to write herself. So that was a lot of fun. But when she agreed, her whole stipulation was kind of silly, because her agreement was, okay, I'll do this with you, Dad, but the story has to involve dogs. And I said, well, okay, I love dogs, so that's not too big of a push. But like, when you say dogs, what do you mean by dogs? Like, how many dogs? She's like, as many as we can pack into the story. I'm like, what? That's ridiculous. Why are you setting up these kind of like unmeetable standards? Come on, that's not fair. What am I supposed to do with that? So it took me a while to figure this out. I remember I went out on my run one day, and while I was out on the run, that's when that idea of the dog fighting ring hit me. And I came back, I was like, I think I have the answer. And she's like, okay, well, it has lots of dogs. It fits. We can have as many dogs as we want. Let's do it. And so we ended up doing the research. I will tell you this, on a more down note, that's all funny and, cute and stuff. But on a more down note, I had no idea what I was getting into, because I knew nothing about dog. I knew that it happened, like that. My exposure to it was like, I knew years ago, like Michael Vick had gotten involved in, the NFL quarterback had gotten involved in dogfighting, and he was, punished, I think, and actually put in jail, if I'm not mistaken, for that. Okay. But I didn't really know anything about it really beyond that. And then when we were doing the research for it, I was horrified. By what we were learning as we were doing the research. I'm like, oh my God, this is like really dark. I don't know if I want to go this dark. This is like way darker than I thought I was getting into. I don't know what I was thinking, but I clearly knew nothing, of what I was about to write. And so that's why, like, if you look at The Pit, we actually ended up, just to kind of bring it down a little bit, we ended up going with a more cartoony art style. The artist is Ramiro Buralo, is a Spanish artist. Mm-hmm. And he did, I think, a really wonderful job, but it has a cartoony style that kind of like lessens the impact a little bit, because it was if we did it in a realistic style, like we do, the Valentine is done by Jaime Martinez, and it's in a very realistic style. I was like, there's no way we're going to do a realistic style for this book. I don't think I want to even publish that, So we ended up going that route, and I think that was the right choice for that, for that particular book. So anyway, so that's what we're doing the Kickstarter about.
Maybe that's why Tony Fleece and Trish did Stray Dogs that way. I never even thought about why they made it, like look like Disney poof cartoon that was about, a serial killer that took dogs as trophies. It was like, this seems like really dark title that I have to keep chasing kids off of so they don't pick that book up. Yeah.
I mean, it's when you get involved in that story planning and you're like, oh my God, I don't know, like, how are we going to do this? Because like I was seeing these images, like some of the things that happen to these dogs is just really terrible. I mean, they're literally filing down their teeth to make it sharper.
Oh,
To do more damage in those ears, like you've seen the cropped ears, like we've all seen cropped ears before, like with Doberman, for example, or boxers or pit bulls, they'll have their ears, cut in that triangle shape. But they actually, when they're doing the fighting, they actually cut them much shorter than that. And the idea is so there's nothing for the opponent dog to bite on, because they'll literally tear their ear off.
Oh,
and I'm just like, that's some pretty dark stuff. So that's why I was like, I had really, I'd come up with this idea for all these dogs as a ghost story, but then I'd picked a ghost story that was really dark, So I was like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into, And so that's why we decided, we really need to, kind of like Scooby-Dooify this. That's a kind of an analogy that somebody made, like to go with the Scooby-Doo effect. So that's kind of what we did. But I think it was the right choice. It deals with and we deal with it seriously, but I just think that the art, having it toned down a little bit was the right choice for that. So,
So,
and we love dogs. I mean, we absolutely love dogs. So we just didn't want to, we didn't want to depict any of the really bad stuff. So,
I feel you. So the Kickstarter that you have up, are there options on there? So if people don't have any of that early stuff?
Yeah, all kinds of options. We really had fun with it. Like we go from like one of the silly options that I put on there just to see if anybody would bite is, how the buttons, the little pin buttons and stuff. We do buttons that feature the cover art of different kind of like milestone shepherd covers. Mm-hmm. And you can buy a set of those. And that I just thought it'd be fun. Of course, all the books, all the novels. The Kickstarter is to get a hardcover version of Volume 3. So that'll be very nice. I love hardcovers. I just, I love books in general. So the thing obviously with hardcovers is they have the durability, the ability to last, like the other ones. Just paperback just can't hold up over time like a hardcover can. And of course that we actually have a 3D statue of the shepherd on there now. And we're working on a 3D shepherd of Legio, so that eventually you'll be able to get both those characters in a 3D print. We've got original artwork by various artists that have done shepherd pieces for us that have committed to doing art for us. So we've got a lot of different things. I mean, I urge people check it out and see what and there's all different price points ranging from like $1 to like I think our most expensive thing is like a $5,000. Like I would do a session with them where I'd literally help them get their comic book from scratch right up to get it published.
Oh, wow.
So that's a range of different things, because I'm working with a friend of mine, Brenton Lengel. I don't know if are you familiar with him? Snow White Zombie Apocalypse.
Okay. I didn't know it was Brenton.
Yeah, Brenton is the writer of Snow White Zombie Apocalypse. I'm pleased to say that I'm the editor on that book. I love it. It's for those who are not familiar. I know you are, but for those who are not familiar, it's kind of like Ash Williams meets fairy tales. It stars Rapunzel, who's a kung fu artist, with Snow White, who's like a white witch. And then Prince Charming, who is, low level, actually is charming, like low level mind control.
Yeah.
Charming. Oh. Yeah. And it's set in a fairyland that is overrun with zombies. And it's hilarious. It's got a lot of, it's violent as all get all, but it's very humorous. So it's like an Ash Williams take on that. So, but anyway, he's working with me on the Kickstarter. So
we ran out of time. I hate that. I don't want the next show to get messed up.
Oh, no problem.
I apologize. Thank you guys so much for being here for Talkin Shop. And thank you so much, Andrea, for coming in. I know you've been traveling, and this takes you, out of your kind of relaxation time, but I'm super thankful for you to come on. Make sure you guys click on that link for the Kickstarter and support it. And also, after you're done with watching the experience today, do go find the Comics with Bueller channel because there is a fun interview with me. So I will see you guys next week. Thank you so much for joining us. See you later.
Join the party. Head over to our Linktree to find all the links for everywhere the experience is all the time.